Think about the last time someone said something to you, maybe weeks ago, maybe months, and you just nodded. You didn't argue. You didn't correct them. You let it go, and then you drove home or walked away or lay in bed that night and played the conversation back. Thought about what you should have said, what you wanted to say, the exact words, the right tone, the moment you let slip right through your fingers. And the version of you in that replay? That version didn't stay quiet. Most of us have a whole archive of those moments, conversations we rewound and re-edited long after they ended, words we swallowed in real time but screamed in private. And at some point, that archive gets heavy, not in a dramatic way, just a slow, steady accumulation of things left unsaid, decisions left unmade, reactions left unexpressed, until one day you realize the gap between who you are in your head and who you are out loud has gotten wider than you're comfortable with. That gap, that specific tension, is exactly what today is about. March 15th, 2026. Mercury and Mars are meeting in an exact conjunction in the sky right now. And if you've ever wondered what that actually feels like in a human body, in a real life, I think it feels like this, like the rehearsed version of yourself finally getting tired of waiting in the wings, like something that has been building quietly for a long time, deciding that today it has somewhere to go. I'm not going to make this video about planetary degrees or technical astrology. What I want to talk about is something much more personal than that. I want to talk about the specific kind of anger that doesn't look like anger from the outside, because it's been so carefully managed, so thoroughly contained, that most people around you have no idea it even exists. The anger that got rebranded as patience, that got dressed up as maturity, that learned to speak in a calm voice and wait for the right moment, a moment that kept getting postponed. Let me start with something very specific. Have you ever been in a situation where someone treated you unfairly and you said nothing? Not because you didn't care, but because you didn't know how to say it, or because you were afraid of being misunderstood, or because you were so tired of explaining yourself that you just folded everything inward and moved on. You put a period where there should have been a conversation, and on the outside, everything looked fine. But inside, something hardened, a small stone of the unspoken that didn't dissolve with time. It only grew denser. That's what I want to talk about today, because the Mercury-Mars conjunction is exactly about those moments, when that stone finally starts to move, when what you've been carrying for months, maybe years, starts asking for a way out. And the question isn't whether it will come out. It will. The question is, how? Mercury is the planet of words, thought, communication. Mars is the planet of action, will, fire. When they meet in the same degree of the sky as they do today, something happens between them that resembles an electrical charge. Words become more direct, thoughts arrive faster, and most importantly, the gap between impulse and expression almost disappears. Whatever you're thinking today, you will likely say, or do, or finally send that message you've had sitting in your drafts for 3 weeks. And that, by itself, is neither good nor bad. It's simply energy. And what you do with it depends entirely on where you are right now. If you've recently been through something unfair, a betrayal, a disappointment, a situation where you weren't heard or were made to feel small, today that wound may start speaking. Not in a destructive sense, but in the sense that your mind and body finally allow you to acknowledge, yes, that hurt. Yes, that was wrong. Yes, I'm angry. And that's okay, because anger is not weakness. Anger is information. It tells you where your boundary was crossed, where you weren't respected, where you gave permission for something you never actually wanted, and when you finally allow yourself to feel that anger, not as something shameful, but as something honest. Something inside you shifts. You begin to see the situation not from the position of someone it happened to, but from the position of someone who understands what happened and decides what comes next. What? I know someone, I won't say who spent several years working at a company where their ideas were consistently ignored. Every time they brought something to the table, it was either dismissed or taken without credit. They were angry, but they told themselves, "This is normal, this is everywhere, just keep going." And they kept going. For a year, then 2, then 3, and then one morning they woke up and understood, not in panic, not in a spiral, but with absolute calm clarity, that this place was slowly killing the best parts of who they were. That same day, they started sending out their resume. No plan B, no guarantees, simply because the anger had finally stopped being pain and had become fuel. That is what anger becoming strength actually looks like. It's not the moment you blame someone or make a scene. It's the moment you stop tolerating what isn't worth your tolerance and start moving toward what actually deserves your energy. Today's astrology is supporting exactly that transition. The Mercury-Mars conjunction doesn't just give you impulse, it gives you language for it. The ability to name what's happening, to articulate it, to put a period where you've been putting ellipses for far too long. Let's talk about 3 doors that might open for you today. Not metaphorically, very specifically. 3 situations, 3 possibilities, 3 moments where this energy might show up in your actual life. The first door is a conversation you've been avoiding. There's someone you've been meaning to say something to for a long time. Maybe it's a person who hurt you and never received an honest response from you. Maybe it's a colleague with whom tension has been building, but nobody wanted to be the one to name it. Maybe it's yourself. And the conversation you've been avoiding is an internal one, where you finally admit something important. Today's energy lowers the threshold of that conversation, not in the sense that you become more aggressive, but in the sense that you become more honest. And if you feel today the urge to say something, don't automatically suppress it. Stop and ask yourself, is this true? Is this what I actually think and feel? If the answer is yes, maybe today is exactly the day. There's a real difference between an aggressive reaction and an honest expression. An aggressive reaction is when you respond to what's happening right now with all the accumulated pain from the past riding along with it. An honest expression is when you tell someone what specifically in their behavior or words affects you and what you actually need. The first one destroys, the second one builds, and Mercury conjunct Mars today gives you the resource for the second, if you consciously choose that path. The second door is a decision you've known for a long time, but were afraid to make. There are situations in life where we know the answer, but aren't ready to accept it. Because it requires change, because it means leaving something behind, leaving a job where you aren't valued, ending a relationship that has long been hollow, walking away from a project that's pulling you under, stopping a dynamic with someone who consistently drains you. We often confuse knowing and readiness. We know what needs to be done, but we tell ourselves, "I'm not ready yet." And there's some truth in that. Sometimes time really is needed, but very often, behind "I'm not ready" is fear. Fear of judgment, fear of being alone, fear that without this, the job, the person, the situation, you won't be okay. Today, Mars is nudging you from knowing to doing. Not necessarily all at once, but one step, one specific, real, concrete step. Write the email, make the call, send the application. Say out loud what you've only been saying in your head. I think about a man I know who stayed in a relationship for a long time, where he was regularly criticized, where every decision he made was questioned, where he gradually stopped being himself and became a version of what was expected of him. He knew the relationship wasn't allowing him to grow, had known it for about a year, but he kept finding reasons to stay. He felt guilty about leaving. He was afraid of being alone. He told himself, maybe it'll change. And then one evening, no particular reason, just an ordinary Tuesday, something clicked, and he spoke. quietly, without raising his voice, but with complete clarity. He said the truth, not out of cruelty, but because he simply couldn't carry that truth inside any longer. That is what happens when anger stops being suppressed and becomes clarity. It doesn't destroy, it liberates. The third door is a new understanding of yourself, and this is perhaps the most subtle but most powerful of the three, because sometimes the most important shift doesn't happen in your external life. It happens in how you see yourself, in what you allow yourself to think about yourself. There are people who have carried an identity as someone who endures. They take pride in their endurance. They see it as a virtue, and in a certain sense it is. Resilience, stability, the ability not to react impulsively. But there's a moment when endurance becomes something else, when it becomes a way to avoid conflict, to avoid change, to avoid taking responsibility for your own happiness. Today, you might notice that moment in your life. Ask yourself, where am I enduring not because it's right, but because I'm afraid? Where is my anger actually a signal that something in my life needs to change? Where am I suppressing my own strength under the guise of humility or patience? These are not easy questions. I'm not saying the answers will come all at once, but today's energy opens up space for those questions. And if you allow yourself to ask them, honestly, without self-judgment, you might receive answers that permanently change how you understand yourself. I want to pause here and talk about something many people don't understand about anger. We were taught that anger is bad, that people who get angry are weak, uncontrolled, dangerous. So we learn to hide it, to cover it with a smile, to translate it into sarcasm or silence, or to just swallow it again and again until it transforms into chronic exhaustion, depression, or a persistent feeling of emptiness. But anger, if you look at it honestly, is one of the most survival-oriented emotions we have. It arises when something important to you is under threat, when your dignity is violated, when your boundaries are ignored, when something you value is dismissed. Anger is your body and your mind saying, "This is wrong. I don't accept this. This needs to change." And if you learn to listen to anger rather than suppress it, you gain one of the most accurate internal compasses you possess. It will show you where you're living against your own values, where you're giving too much and receiving too little, where you've been playing a role that isn't yours. The Mercury-Mars conjunction today is not a permission slip for an uncontrolled explosion. It's an invitation to honesty, to finally call things what they are, at least to yourself. And from that honesty, if you let it take root, something very important grows, an understanding of what you actually want. Because behind anger, there is almost always desire. You're not angry at someone simply because they behaved badly. You're angry because you wanted something different: respect, love, recognition, honesty. And you didn't receive it. And if you can move from "I'm angry at them" to "I wanted respect from them and didn't get it," you're no longer in the position of someone things happen to. You're in the position of someone who understands their own needs and can advocate for them. That is anger becoming strength, not loud, not destructive, but deep, quiet, purposeful. Like a river that has found its course and flows forward. Let me talk about how this might look in specific situations today, because I know that astrology is well and good, but people need real-life examples to understand what we're actually talking about. Imagine someone who received a message this morning from a colleague or a boss that stung. Maybe unfair criticism. Maybe a task dropped in their lap on a Friday evening with no explanation. Maybe their good work was ignored again. The usual response is to swallow it, to reply politely, to pretend everything is fine, and inside, that's stone again. But today something might be different. Not because the person suddenly became aggressive, but because today's energy provides the courage to respond differently. Not rudely, but honestly. I noticed this task came without context or a deadline. I need to better understand the priorities to do this well. Can we talk? That sounds simple. But for someone who has been silent for years, it's a revolution. Or another situation. Someone in a relationship where their opinion is regularly overlooked, where decisions are made without them, where they've long felt like a backdrop rather than a participant. Today they might find the words, "Not you always, not you never," but "When you make decisions without me, I feel like I'm not really here, and that hurts. I want us to change that." One sentence. But it can shift a dynamic that has been forming for years. Or one more situation I see often. Someone who is angry at themselves, not at anyone else, at themselves. For letting so much time go to waste. For staying so long somewhere they were unhappy. For not doing sooner what needed to be done. This self-directed anger, if it's handled the wrong way, becomes self-condemnation. It becomes a break. But if you approach it with the same curiosity, what is it telling me? It suddenly sounds different. Not I was such a fool for waiting this long, but I already know what I don't want, and now I know what I want, and I'm starting to move. That's where Mercury and Mars meet in your interior world, where a thought finally becomes an intention, where an intention becomes a first step. I also want to talk about the fear that often accompanies this process, because when anger begins to transform into strength, when you start speaking more honestly, acting more decisively, standing up for yourself, fear arrives. Fear of not being accepted, fear that relationships will change, fear of hurting someone, fear of becoming difficult, fear that you're asking for too much. That fear is real. I won't tell you it's imaginary. Sometimes, when you start holding your boundaries, people do react negatively. Sometimes things do change. Sometimes that's painful. But ask yourself, what do you get in return for staying silent, for enduring, for again and again setting your needs aside so someone else can be comfortable? You think you're preserving the relationship, but what you're preserving is only the shape of it. An empty shell with no warmth left inside. Because real closeness is when someone knows who you actually are, with your limits, your desires, your anger, your joy, your weakness, and your strength, and stays. Someone who only stays when you're silent isn't staying with you. They're staying with a version of you that doesn't exist. Today's energy invites you to begin showing who you actually are, not out of spite, not to cause harm, simply out of respect for yourself. There's one more dimension to all of this I want to speak to. It's not about specific situations or conversations. It's about a general sense of direction, the feeling of where you're actually headed. Many people who have held anger inside for a long time describe a similar experience. They felt like they were moving on autopilot, doing what was expected of them, living as was deemed appropriate, never seriously asking themselves, what do I actually want? Where do I want to be in a year, in 5? What truly matters to me? Suppressed anger takes up space. It consumes energy that could be going toward creation, toward growth, toward connection, toward dreams. And when that anger finally finds the right outlet, through honesty and action, you suddenly discover a resource you hadn't felt in a long time: clarity, lightness, a genuine desire to do something, to build something, to move. That's why anger becoming strength isn't just about one particular conflict or one specific conversation. It's about how you fundamentally relate to your own place in the world. Do you believe you have the right to take up space, that your voice matters, that your needs are worth honoring, that you deserve relationships, work, environments that respect you? Mercury and Mars today are saying, yes, you have the right. Your voice matters. Your needs are worth honoring. And if something or someone in your life has been consistently telling you otherwise, this energy gives you the strength to see that clearly and to do something about it. Not necessarily everything at once. Change rarely happens in one enormous leap. Most often it's a series of small decisions, one honest conversation, one refusal of something that drains you, one choice made based on what you actually want rather than what's expected of you. And these small decisions, made today in the energy of Mercury conjunct Mars, can become the beginning of something significant. Because today is not an ordinary day. Today, the planets are standing at a point where word and action merge into one. And if you use this, if you allow yourself to be more honest, more courageous, more decisive in even one small thing, you will plant a seed that will grow further than you can currently imagine. I think about everyone watching this video right now, and I understand that each person carries their own particular anger, their own situation, their own person who caused pain, their own decision that has been waiting, their own moment that hasn't quite arrived, but is approaching. And I want to say something to you very simply. What you feel is valid. The anger you carry inside you is not weakness and not something to be ashamed of. It's a part of you that wants to live, that wants to be heard, that wants to be treated the way you deserve to be treated. Today you have the chance to give that part of yourself a voice, not to destroy something, but to build something, not to seek revenge, but to move forward, not to prove anything to anyone else, but to finally prove something to yourself, that you matter enough to stand up for yourself. That is the strength I've been talking about. Not loud, not destructive, quiet, steady, deep. Like the roots of a tree nobody sees but that hold everything above ground in place. Today, March 15th, 2026, as Mercury and Mars stand together in the sky, allow yourself to hear that strength inside you. Allow anger to tell you its truth. Allow that truth to become your first step. Something in you is already moving. You can probably feel it right now, watching this. A sensation that's difficult to name but feels like a beginning. Like the moment just before something shifts. Like the very thin membrane between how things were and how they're about to be. Trust that feeling. It isn't lying to you. If this video touched something in you, if there's something you felt today, decided today, understood today, write it in the comments. I read every single one. And often the conversations that happen underneath these videos are the most honest ones. Because when someone writes their truth without fear of judgment, sometimes for the very first time, that is also an act of that same strength we've been talking about. Anger that finally found its voice. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. What we do here is talk about astrology not as magic, but as language. A language that helps us better understand what's happening inside and around us. And if that approach resonates with you, stay. There's so much more to talk about. Until next time, take care of yourself.